Welcome to the Women in Motorsports. My name is Joe Samiega, and with me we have Ben Schneider. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for making this weekend possible. This is part of the Grand Prix of Portland race weekend for the NTT IndyCar Series. We're very excited for the opportunity to be here, and of course, your investment helps make that possible. Overall, let's get started. A lot to talk about, but this is weekend. Over in Zandvoort, F1 Academy is back.
That's right, Joe. So F1 Academy is back. Abbi Pulling, of course, wants to continue on the championship drive that she's already started to assemble here. She, of course, has a massive points lead after her starts of the season. And coming into Zandvoort, it's a track where she finished 7th and 10th in last year's F1 Academy season. She also finished 7th in a W Series race there in 2021. So, Joe, is there any reason in your mind why Abbi Pulling wouldn't be the favorite going into this weekend?
Abbi Pulling has to be the easy favorite for the weekend. Such a dominant season. Really, she cannot lose the points lead. Just run your race. You're probably going to be in the podium anyway. She knows how to run this track. I think the pressure is really off her. She knows she has the championship pretty much wrapped up unless she has a disastrous second half of the season.
Well, mathematically, everyone is still in the championship hunt as we're just now getting to the halfway point of the year. But of course, we know realistically, Pulling has a massive championship lead. Doriane Pin and Chloe Chambers are her two closest competitors. So you could say maybe if they start a strong run here in the next couple of rounds, they might be able to close the gap a little bit. And of course, that'll change depending on the results of this weekend. So if you're a driver in the mid point of the standings or towards the rear, you've only picked up a few points so far this season, what approach do you take heading into these two races here to kind of turn your season around and at least climb up the standings as far as you can get?
For the drivers way back in the pack, I think they have to be a little bit more aggressive. They want to prove they belong in F1 Academy. So look for them to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the setup, trying something to qualify up towards the front. Mid-pack, that upper half, the consistency. If a driver up front, one of the top 3 drivers, they could have issues. You could have a good race, pull off some points. That just easily climbs you up the standings. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see almost 3 different strategies when it comes to drivers. Those are going to be more aggressive to prove, hey, I belong here in F1 Academy. Those that playing conservative, but just taking advantage of mistakes by others. And then the ones, I think the top 3 that are just hopeful. We know Doriane Pin wants to get this championship. She's going to be, I think, very aggressive this weekend.
And speaking of the championship, last year's champion from 2023, Marta Garcia, was in the news this week. She'll be making her GT debut with the Iron Dames. Alpine, meanwhile, who Abbi Pulling is affiliated with, they're going through a lot of internal turmoil and situations going on at that team. So, Joe, if Abbi can wrap up this championship early, obviously it won't be this weekend in all likelihood, but what would that do for looking for her potentially for her career and future ventures away from Alpine, or is there a possibility she might stay with the program?
I think she has to look at other options besides Alpine. With all the turmoil going on with the Alpine organization and Formula One, we know they got endurance racing presence. Maybe that could be a route for her, but I just feel like this is F1 Academy. You sort of want the person to continue going to the F1 ladder system. So this news of Marta Garcia getting to GT sports car racing, I think it's a little bit of an eye-opener. It's still a great opportunity. Iron Dames, really good program, really great racing team. But we've talked about in times, we want to see sort of that ladder system, something to elevate female drivers up. In the case of F1, if you're defending champions going to GT endurance car racing, and Abbi Pulling, the Alpine team is a mess. You really want Alpine to say, okay, you're going to sports car racing. I think it just sends a mixed message. So if I was Abbi, I might consider looking at different options. And who knows, maybe F1 management is thinking like, hey, you're successful. Is there anything we can help you with? Maybe another team steps in. So it'd be really interesting to see if she could get this championship wrapped up.
All right, we'll keep our eye on that. Of course, 2 races in one round this weekend at Zandvoort. F1 Academy back on track as they get their season back underway. But in the meantime, Joe, let's recap the ARCA Menards Series race weekend, a really historic race at Springfield with the Venturini drivers.
A hugely historic weekend. Springfield 100 dirt track race, historic resort. 4 female drivers finishing in the top 10. Isabel Robusta and Taylor Reimer finished second and third place. Tony Branniger and Amber Balkan were sixth and eighth. So 4 female drivers started race, all 4 of them in the top 10. This is the most in a ARCA and NASCAR sanctioned event. How huge has this moment been for ARCA and also NASCAR?
Well, Joe, it's absolutely massive, and it was a great weekend for all 4 of them. Your full timers, Tony Breidinger and Amber Balkan, 6th and 8th. Breidinger had to start at the rear along with Isabella Robusto because they weren't able to take a time in practice, and that relegated them to the last row of the grid. So their finish is even more impressive when you consider the drive through the field that they had to make. And I love that Amber Balkan kept the receipts on a Twitter troll that was saying, no, none of you are going to finish in the top 10. Guess what? They all finished in the top 10 and deserve a lot of credit for that. But specifically, the 2 part-time drivers, of course, Isabella Robusto, we've talked about her a lot on the show this year, and coming back from her injury that kind of derailed last season for her, she's looked very, very strong, and she drove all the way up to second place. Of course, William Sawalich was the dominant car of the day. Nobody was going to catch him. He led all but 1 lap of this race. But I guess you could say if he's in a class of his own, then Isabella Robusto was a class winner for everybody else with her second place run. And Taylor Reimer as well, qualifying and finishing in third place. Massive improvement from where she ran in this race last year. We'll see her back at DuQuoin, and potentially she hinted at the end of last season that she wants to do at least 1 pavement race with Venturini as well, as that's kind of the career trajectory that she's on. But second and third for those 2 especially, 2 female drivers on the podium, so to speak, in ARCA. Huge moment for the entire stock car racing landscape.
Yeah, massive moment for the NASCAR landscape. And one of the things I know we've talked about a lot when it comes to seeing a female driver getting the win, podium finishes, but really top 10, especially in the United States, that's a huge deal. Of course, FIA top 10 finishers in Formula 1, Formula E, World Rally score points. So top 10 is another significant milestone to have. 4 females, and if there was another female in the field to get there, half the top 10 females potentially in the future. How significant would that be once we get to the point where seeing more than 2 or 3 females finishing in the top 10 in a race? How huge would that be as a turning moment for motorsports?
Well, Joe, I talked about this on the show earlier this year as well. And it's the point Dave Moody brought up on his radio show. We can kind of make that comparison with the NHRA and a championship driver like ARCA Enders. The headlines no longer say female driver wins NHRA event or, female driver ARCA Enders. It's just ARCA Enders because it's common enough in NHRA now. And John Force's daughters and several others. I mean, Shirley Muldowney's an absolute legend in the drag racing world. They've had very many successful female drivers come up through the ranks in that part of the motorsports landscape, but we haven't really seen that in stock car racing, and certainly not since Danica Patrick retired several years ago now. So for Venturini and Toyota, just to field 4 female drivers in one race is a historic moment, but to have all 4 of them finish in the top 10, obviously a top 10 in a 20-car ARCA race is not the same as a 40-car Cup Series race, but if we continue on the path that we're on, making the progress that we are, potentially we could see Isabella Robusto doing that in just a few years' time here. Not that we want to rush her up a ladder or anything, but this is the first step. And I can't emphasize enough. I think Robusto had like 30 laps on dirt. This was only her second dirt race that I know of, at least, in following her career, and to come in here and be the highest finishing Venturini car. And for Venturini as a whole to get a result like this. And I know the show's called Women in Motorsports, but let's show Chris Wright a little bit of love as well. He finished in the top 10, so half of the top 10 was Venturini Motorsports this weekend. So an all-around good result for them. And for Breidinger and Balkan, of course, the 2 female drivers, like I said on Encore Monday night, they certainly needed that because it's been a rough few races for each of them with some DNFs and things like that. So, great weekend, and hopefully there's more to come, not just in ARCA, but in the top 3 series of NASCAR in the years to come as well.
A lot of potential will be following that. And of course, as we all know, I'm here in Portland at the Media Center. Indy next, IndyCar. Gateway, Catherine Legge. Unfortunately, her race ended on lap 5 contact with the wall. Jamie Chadwick, though, was running second place. Looked like he was going to have a great race, but then contact on the front stretch. The win for race. Was that too early for racing or is it incident?
Yeah, you can tell clearly the track is hot over at Portland. I think, Joe, you were asking, was that too early for the contact that took Jamie Chadwick out of the Indy next race? And I think it was. And again, we talked about this on Encore a little bit Monday as well. But yeah, I think Kyle Collette, moving down the track a little bit there. It's unfortunate that it ended Jamie's race, and she looked like she was on track to have obviously a massive improvement. Obviously the bar was set very low from her result at Gateway last year. She really struggled adapting to the series in general, I think, coming from the European ladder, but on the ovals, especially, a totally foreign concept for her. Now that she's had a year under her belt, was really looking forward to seeing what she could do from that front row starting spot. And it's unfortunate that her race ended as early as it did. So we've got a couple more ovals to finish out the year. We'll see how she continues to progress over there. But yeah, if it's the last lap and you're coming to the start-finish line, maybe that's a little bit more forgivable in a series where drivers are continuing to learn and work their way up the ladder. But even here in Indy Next, the second highest ladder position on the road to Indy, so to speak, before you get to IndyCar, you ought to know better and take it a little bit easier in the opening laps like that than to risk double DNF as a result of contact there. So hopefully it's a lesson learned, and we'll see what Chadwick can do the remainder of this year.
Is this the kind of track that could suit her style?
Yeah, this is the benefit of not doing the show live. Is Joe's obviously at the track, and again, doing this on a tight schedule with the timing of everything going on at Portland. But I think he was asking about Chadwick's upcoming weekend. Here, this was one of her stronger runs on the road and street courses in her rookie season last year in 2023. So coming off of the success of her Road America victory earlier this year, she also had a podium at the IMS road course even before that. So, I think this could be a great opportunity for her to bounce back from the misfortunate Gateway. I don't know that she's necessarily the favorite to win the race. Louis Foster has been on an absolute tear. I can't remember the last time he finished outside of a top two this season. So I think he's got to be the favorite among all the drivers in the series to go out and win again this weekend. But if Chadwick's able to take pole position or start on the front row once again and can get a clean start this time, the sky's the limit for her. I wouldn't put winning this race past her at all at the same time there. So this could potentially be a good bounce back weekend for her, but we'll just have to wait and see for the cars to get on track here. Sounds like they already are again over at Portland. Lots going on there this weekend, and we'll continue to recap it. Big weekend for us here at the Grid Network, but we'll have our eye on Jamie Chadwick as well for this show, and hopefully she can bounce back from that misfortunate result at Gateway.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what's going to happen now along with Indy Next, IndyCar, watch some of the other races that
some of the other races we have going on this weekend, of course, Indy Next over at Portland, and Joe and Jackson will be there providing on-site coverage for that. And then the ARCA Menards Series will be back in action as well, the Milwaukee Mile, along with the NASCAR trucks, of course, Xfinity Cup down at Daytona this weekend. So that should be exciting. And then, like we talked about at the start of the show, F1 Academy has a doubleheader at Zandvoort, companion weekend with the Dutch Grand Prix. And then the Iron Dames will be back in action, like we alluded to as well, with Marta Garcia making her GT debut at Spa. So I'm going to go ahead and take the closing here. I won't make Joe try to talk over the roar of the engines on the hot track here, but thank you all so much for watching this, and we encourage everyone subscribe to the Grid Network here. Joe and Jackson Lambros are going to have some great coverage this weekend, all weekend long here at Portland for the IndyCar race weekend, so stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for our Grid Live shows this weekend as well, and then my show, Grid Encore, Monday will recap the Indy Next race, among other things. And a big thank you again to our Patreon supporters. These are the weekends where your support means more than ever to us. And if you want to see these kinds of weekends more often here at the Grid Network, if you liked what you saw on this episode, if you liked what you've seen from our coverage so far this season, you can consider joining Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in Grid Network and helping get us to the track more often in 2025 and beyond. For Joe Samniego, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on the Grid Network.